When people ask me what self agency really is, I don't make it complicated because it isn't. And if I had to put it into one word, I'd say it's choice, plain and simple. Agency is really about whether you're deciding what happens next or whether everything else is deciding for you, whether that's other people, circumstances, systems, timing, or just inertia. All the things people like to talk about: freedom, autonomy, confidence, responsibility, those don't come first. They come after you start choosing. Because if you can choose, you can act. And if you can act, you can change things. And if you can't choose, you're mostly just reacting to whatever shows up. And choice doesn't mean you have unlimited options or perfect conditions, because that's not real life. It means you're willing to take ownership of the options that actually exist and do something with it. A high agency person walks into a situation and doesn't ask whose job it is or who dropped the ball. They ask what the fastest way forward is, what outcome actually matters, and what they can personally do to move things in that direction. That's an important distinction because high agency people don't just focus on tasks, they focus on outcomes, and they don't get lost in activity for activity's sake. They're constantly orienting around the bigger picture of what problem is being solved, why it matters, and what success actually looks like on the other side. So think about a founder whose product breaks the night before launch, where low agency sounds like engineering screwed this up, and high agency sounds like, okay, what can we realistically deliver by morning that still serves the customer and protects the business? Who do I need to pull in? And what's the workaround? Even when something isn't their fault, they treat it as their problem to solve, not because they want to be a hero or take on unnecessary pain, but because ownership gives you leverage and responsibility gives you room to move. And this is where the deeper reason all of this matters starts to show up, because high agency isn't about hustle or control for its own sake. It's about direction and outcomes. Without agency, your life and work gets shaped by default by other people's priorities, slow systems, and accidental outcomes. But with agency, you get to aim, you get to decide what actually matters, what problems are worth solving, and what trade offs you're willing to accept to get there. That ability to see the big picture and still act inside, it is one of the defining traits of high agency people. And it's exactly why they tend to rise into leadership, executive roles, and entrepreneurship, because those roles don't reward task completion. They reward judgment, prioritization, and outcome ownership. That's why someone like Elon Musk is such a clear example of high agency. Because when SpaceX rockets failed again and again, he didn't accept industry norms or outsource responsibility. He pulled engineering in house, learned the constraints himself, changed the system, and kept going, all while holding a very clear picture of the long term outcome he was aiming for. High agency gives purpose traction because it's how values stop being abstract ideas and start turning into real results. And this is also where confidence actually gets built, because high agency replaces hope with proof. When you act instead of waiting, when you decide before you feel ready, when you take risk and fix problems instead of explaining them, you start seeing yourself cause outcomes. And confidence stops being a mood and starts being a conclusion drawn from repeated cause and effect. You see this with great movie producers, where if a shoot falls apart, they're not stuck in blame or drama. They're calling locations, reworking schedules, renegotiating contracts, doing whatever keeps momentum alive and protects the final result, because momentum and outcomes really do matter. High agency people don't wait for permission. They don't wait for perfect information, and they don't wait for consensus to feel safe. They move, they test, they learn, and they adjust, all while keeping the end goal in view. An ER doctor doesn't run alignment meetings in a crisis. They make the best call they can with incomplete information, act, and correct in real time, because not deciding is still a decision, and it's usually the worst one. That bias toward decision shows up in how they operate every day, where reversible decisions get made quickly and irreversible ones get one focused thinking block and then a commitment, which is exactly how Jeff Bezos built Amazon by separating speed from perfection and always orienting around long term value. They don't wait for clarity, they create it by acting. They act before permission exists because if no one has explicitly said no, they move, they send the email, share the draft, propose the idea, and every time they do that and survive, their brain updates with the belief that they don't need approval to move. They also close loops because unfinished things drain agency. So there's a personal rule to finish at least one meaningful thing every day, even if it's small, because finishing reinforces the belief that when you start something, it actually ends. They replace venting with fixing, not because emotions don't exist, but because motion restores control. So this is frustrating, turns into what's the next action that actually changes the outcome. And when they mess up, they take responsibility out loud, saying things like, that's on me, or I missed it, or I'll fix it. Not as self punishment, but because ownership removes shame, restores leverage, and keeps the team focused on solutions instead of stories. High agency people fail more than most people, but they fail actively. And you see this clearly in someone like Serena Williams, where losses never defined her identity. They became information, and her confidence came from knowing she could recover, adapt, and dominate again. Failure stops feeling fatal when you've survived it enough times. What high agency people are really optimizing for is throughput, meaning how fast decisions get made, how fast learning happens, and how fast execution follows. Because in business and entrepreneurship, speed to insight and speed to correction matter more than being right the first time. That's why certain things drive them crazy, like performative work, slides instead of decisions, updates with no outcomes, waiting culture, meetings to plan meetings, and victim narratives that blame systems, timing, leadership, or luck without touching a single lever. They're allergic to ambiguity that just sits there because not knowing is fine, but staying confused is a choice. Under pressure, they don't zoom out and spiral. They zoom in and ask what's controllable right now. One action, one decision, one lever that actually moves the outcome. When something goes wrong, their default assumption isn't doom. It's that there's something they don't know yet, and curiosity beats panic every time. They expect plans to break, and instead of thinking, if this fails, I'm done, they think this will break somewhere and I'll adapt, which assumes flexibility instead of fragility. And that assumption is exactly what makes them effective leaders. Fear still shows up, but it doesn't get to make decisions because fear is treated as data, not authority. And if the worst case is survivable, they move. They also separate self worth from outcomes because results are feedback, not identity. And that separation is what follows fast recovery, clean learning, and consistent performance at high levels. Fake alignment really bothers them. All the nodding with no ownership, watered down decisions that no one is accountable for because they'd rather say, here's the call I'm making, and if it's wrong, I'll fix it, which is exactly the posture required in senior leadership and entrepreneurship. Process worship annoys them too because rules are tools, and if a tool blocks reality, the tool is wrong. What really sets them off is false constraint. Things like, that's just how it's done, or we're not allowed, because high agency people hear that and think, has anyone actually tried? And that mindset is why they end up building new businesses, new systems, and new markets. Over time, all of this builds a private track record, not affirmations or hype, just memory. And the identity shifts from I hope this works to I'll figure it out, which is a much more durable place to operate from when you're responsible for outcomes, teams, or capital. This is also why high agency leadership matters so much because teams copy what leaders do, not what they say. And leaders who model ownership, big picture thinking, and outcome focus create fast, resilient organizations, while leaders who model low agency create slow, fragile ones. The point of high agency isn't ego, dominance, or grind, it's impact. It's being able to move work that matters, see the whole board, make hard calls, and build teams that don't stall when things get hard. And it doesn't happen by accident because high agency is built deliberately through strategy, repetition, and choosing discomfort over drift. And if you don't design for agency, the environment will design against it. If someone wants to become insanely high agency, it's not about personality, it's about practice. The fastest way is small daily reps. Decide one thing faster than you feel comfortable with every day. Do one thing before you feel ready. Close one loop. Convert venting into action. Publicly own one small miss. And under pressure, force the question of what outcome actually matters right now and what you can control in the next 10 minutes. Track proof, not feelings, because confidence isn't built by winning, it's built by repeatedly proving you can move without certainty and recover without drama. This isn't about being aggressive, it's about being decisive, responsible, and outcome oriented. High agency is quiet confidence backed by action, clear ownership, big picture thinking, and fast correction. It's saying, I'll handle it and actually handling it. And when you strip it all down, self agency is simple but not easy because it's choosing to engage reality as something you can work with instead of something you have to endure. If it matters, you act. If it breaks, you fix it. If you don't know how, you learn it. That's the whole game. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.